Quartalusha pazdvchkskvn gwortit. I pazdvchkskvn quartalusha pazdv. Gchkskvn gwortalusha pazdvchkzi. Kvn gwortalusha pazdvchkskvn. Wortiusha pazdvchkskvn gwortalue. O pazdvchkskvn quartalusha pazdvs. Jkulskvn gwortalusha pazdvchksks. Vn gwortalusha pazdvchkskvn. Urtiusha pazdvchkskvn gwortaluik. Pazdvchkskvn gwortalusha pazdvt. Jkulskvn gwortalusha pazdvchksi. Vn gwortalusha pazdvchkskvn gwe. LTSIPN. LIPRSRRWS at 1 equals. Black Origins of Ancient Greek Civilization. By Gert Muller. Black Origins of Ancient Greek Civilization. Gert Muller. Copyright symbol 2013 Gert Muller. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reprinted or reproduced or utilized in any form or by any electronic, mechanical, or other means, now or hereafter invented, including photocopying and recording, or in any information storage or retrieval system, without permission in writing from the publishers. Pomegranate Publishing. London. Table of Contents. Introduction. Chapter 1, The Ancient Traditions. Chapter 2, Means, Motive and Opportunity to Influence. The Formation of Greek Civilization. Chapter 3, The Mycenaean Civilization. Chapter 4, Black Civilization. In the 1. St. Millennium BC. Chapter 5, Black Cyprus. Chapter 6, The East Greeks of Asia Minor. Chapter 7, Bactria and Athens. Conclusion. Introduction. The first culture that preceded urban development on the Aegean island of Crete was the Minoan. Its people were agricultural, mother goddess worshipping, bronze users who may VE originated in Asia Minor, Anatolia. The culture goes back to the beginning of the Bronze Age on Crete and is divided into early, middle and late. The magnificent palace civilization of Crete, beginning around 2000 BC, was Europe's first civilization and emerged out of the Middle Minoan culture. The first culture that preceded urban development on the Aegean mainland was the Helladic. They too were agricultural, mother goddess worshipping, bronze users. The culture goes back to the beginning of the Bronze Age around 3000 BC, ending around 1000 BC, and is divided into early, middle and late Helladic. Bronze working is thought to have come from Asia Minor, Anatolia, where it developed very early. Between 3000 BC and 2000 BC, the Indo-European speaking ancestors of the Greeks arrived in the region. The late Helladic I became the Mycenaean civilization, the first urban culture of mainland Greece. The late Helladic III terminated in the proto-geometric culture, which developed into the geometric, orientalizing, archaic and finally the culture of classical Greece in the 5th and 4th centuries BC. This book shall explore the evidence for African and Afro-Canaanite formative influences on Crete and mainland Greece. A scholar named Martin Bernal wrote 3 volumes called Black Athena, which looked at Egyptian and Phoenician influence on the development of Aegean civilization. This book differs from Black Athena in 5 fundamental ways. 1. Our Egyptians are, as Anu MB and 2 would say, unmistakably black. Bernal's are somewhat black. 2. The main Egyptian players in this study are not the Hyksos. 3. This study openly acknowledges and emphasizes the Afro-Canaanite origin of the Phoenicians. 4. It posits 7 different black origins and influences on Greek civilization. 5. It shows, with commentary, 42 color pictures of obviously influential people of African appearance depicted in the art of all the various phases of Greek culture. We now proceed with the study. Chapter 1, The Ancient Traditions. The ancient traditions concerning the origins of Greek civilization. In the mid-19th century, the only information at their disposal concerning the origins of Greek civilization was the ancient traditions or myths. Archaeology was yet to tell them anything. It is not surprising that the historians of the day greatly valued the ancient traditions but did not do so uncritically. Much which is related in the accounts of this period must be rejected as idle fiction, yet a few important events may be selected. And authenticated civilization had its first impulse in the arrival of colonists from Egypt and Phoenicia, who laid the foundations of some of the principal cities, as Argos and Sicyon about 1800 years BC. Little advancement was made, however, until the lapse of more than 2 centuries. Other colonies were planted, at Athens by Cecrops and at Thebes by Ctmus, about the time of Moses. Between this time and the Trojan War, considerable progress must have been made in cultivation. We find some of the peculiar institutions of the Greeks originating in this period, particularly the oracles at Delphi and Dodona, the mysteries at Eleusis, and the 4 sacred games, the court of Areopagus at Athens, and the celebrated Amphictyonic Council. The arts and sciences likewise received considerable attention. Letters had been introduced by Ctmus. Astronomy was sufficiently studied to enable Chiron to furnish the Argonauts with an artificial sphere exhibiting the constellations. Classical antiquities, being part of the Manual of Classical Literature by Johann Joachim Eschenberg, E.C. Biddle 1860-72 p. Do the ancient traditions of Greece really say that their civilization was founded by Egyptians and Phoenicians? The traditions of the Argolid region of Greece begin with Inachos and his descendants. The river Inachos plays an important part in the myths of Argolis, where he appears as the husband of Malea and the father of Pheroneus, the first king of Argos, and of the moon goddess Io, the later Hera. There can be little doubt that in prehistoric times the Inachos was an important river. Tiryns, the prehistoric palace of the kings of Tiryns by Heinrich Schliemann, Arno Press 1976, 1. St. published in the late 19th century, 13 p. According to the legend, Inachos, the river god, was the father of Pheroneus and Io. Zeus impregnates Io, who is then turned into a heifer by Hera, the jealous wife of Zeus. Neither Zeus nor Io has their complexion specified. Io wanders down to Egypt as a pregnant heifer and there gives birth to, who is referred to by Shylos as, Black Epaphos. Memphis, daughter of the Nile god, marries Epaphos and has a daughter called Libya. Poseidon, the sea god, marries Libya, who bears him 2 sons. They are Balus, king of Egypt, and Ajona, king of Tyre. Ajona marries Telephassa, daughter of the Nile god, and have Ptmos, Phoenix and Cilix. The first 2 are princes of Tyre, while the latter is the princess. She is kidnapped by Zeus, in the form of a white bull, and taken to Crete. He impregnates her with Minos, Rhadamanthus and Sarpedon, who all become the first kings of Crete. Prince Ctmos is sent by the king of Tyre to seek Europa. He travels to Rhodes, Thera, and eventually ends up in Bottia in mainland Greece, where he founds the city of Thebes. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, King Balus had sired 2 sons, Aegyptos and Danaos. Aegyptos wanted his 50 sons to marry the 50 daughters of Danaos. He and the daughters flee Egypt to avoid the marriage. They land in Argos, Greece, and claim the right of return based on their ancestress Io. Danaos' arrival in Argos is traditionally dated to 1511 BC. The current king of Argos, descendant of Pharonous, does not recognize them as having Argive descent. He describes them as black and tells them they resemble Ethiopia's neighbors, Nile dwellers, Cypriots and Indians rather than Argives. They threaten to kill themselves and the king grants them the right to stay. The Danaids, as they are called, then become alarmed when they spot the Egyptians approaching the shores of Greece in their ships. The Danaids can identify them by their black skins and white tunics. On the eve of their wedding all the Danaids kill their grooms, with the exception of Hypermestra who spares Lyncus. Her husband, Lyncus, the Egyptian, becomes king of Argos and his great-great-great-grandson Perseus founds Mycenae and marries Andromeda, princess of Ethiopia. Analysis of Argive tradition. 3 elements of this tradition stand out. 1. The central characters of this tradition are all black. Epaphos, one of the early ancestors of the lineage, is clearly identified as black. The same is true of the Danaids and Egyptians. We can only conclude that all those in the generations between Epaphos and the Danaids were intended to be black. These would include the royal family of Tyre, ancestors of the Phoenicians. Ajonah, the ancestor, is the son of Libya and marries a daughter of the Nile god. This cannot suggest anything other than an African appearance. Presumably the Argives and other Greeks of the time would have described Cnos and Europa as Nile dwellers or Ethiop's neighbors. It is also clear from the tradition that the Egyptian and Phoenician royal lineages were thought to be related by blood. 2. The Egyptian and Phoenician royal lineages in the story were descended from Libya. So were the Cretan and Argive lineages. It raises the question of whether we should look to Libya for strong contributions towards Egyptian and Cretan civilization. Ajonah stands for the coastal Canaanites. We also notice Cnos stands for the coastal Canaanites that moved to Greece, while Europa stands for those that moved to Crete. Phoenix stands for those coastal Canaanites that later moved to Africa, hence the term Punic, while Cilix stands for those that moved to Cilicia in Asia Minor. 3. The first civilizations of Greece were the Minoan on Crete and the Mycenaean on the mainland. This tradition attributes Libyan, Egyptian and Phoenician founding or influence on both. There is also something else of interest. The most well-known study of what the traditions have to say about Egyptian and Phoenician influence on Greek civilization was conducted by Martin Bernal. He gave the impression the Danaids represented the descendants of Hyksos, invaders of Egypt. He links the name Epaphos with the Hyksos pharaoh Apophis. In fairness to Bernal, the names are strikingly similar. Unfortunately, some elements of the story are in vigorous disagreement with the Hyksos association. Epaphos was black and born in Memphis of a heifer. In ancient Egypt there was the real custom of the Apis bull, based in Memphis and black in color. In terms of phonetics, Epaphos is more similar to Apophis, Apip, than to Apis, but in terms of storyline it seems pretty clear that Epaphos is a reference to the Apis bull. This already is quite problematic to the Hyksos interpretation. Even worse still is the fact that the Apis bull was thought to be an incarnation of Osiris. The cult of Osiris and the cult of Seth and Apip, followed by the Hyksos, were opposed. This potentially blows the Hyksos theory right out of the water. Also both Egyptos, who Bernal holds to represent the indigenous Egyptians, and Danaos, who he held to represent the Hyksos, were both descended from Epaphos. It is more consistent with the facts of the tradition to interpret both Egyptos and Danaos as indigenous Egyptians. When Danaos left Egypt he departed from his hometown of Chemis in Upper Egypt according to the tradition. Herodotus tells us that Danaos and Lyncus were Chemites from Upper Egypt and that the Chemites of his day recognized them as ancestors, Book 2, 91. The Hyksos were based in Lower Egypt. We, therefore, conclude that the ancient traditions are not consistent with the Hyksos theory. The Genesis evidence. Genesis 10 is also called the Toldoth B'nai Noah or Table of the Nations. In Eden, the biblical garden discovered in East Africa, we concluded that Ham, Shem and Japhet were personifications of Africa, Southwest Asia and Eurasia. The sons of these three were countries or regions of the three divisions. Canaan, ancestor of the Sidonians, was the youngest son of Ham, Africa, and a brother to Mizraim, Egypt. We also concluded that, using this logic, Canaan was seen as a part of Africa, at this time, as it is the only son of Ham lying outside the continental limits of Africa, right on its doorstep. This agrees with the Argive tradition, which has Balus and Ajona as brothers. The Greeks are descended from Javan, a son of Japhet, Eurasia, in Genesis 10. The Cretans, however, are thought to come from a son of Mizraim called Caphtorim. This is from evidence such as the tomb of Gert Muller, 18. Th dynasty vizier of Egypt, which shows Cretans classed under the term Kt. It also shows them looking like Egyptians and Nubians, see unmistakably black, sculpture and paintings from Europe's first civilization by Anu M. Bantu, Pomegranate Publishers 2013. In the third generation from the three sons of Noah are included immigrant communities now located on different continents like Nimrod, son of Cush from Africa but moved to West Asia, and Caphtorim, son of Mizraim but moved to Crete. On the basis of the ancient traditions, we would have to conclude that the ancient Greeks and Hebrews thought the origins of Greek or Aegean civilization lay with black people from Libya, Egypt and Phoenicia. History, however, is not based on tradition but on archaeological and other forms of evidence. We, therefore, have to investigate whether the most important pieces of evidence back up the traditions. We have to ask whether our three groups had the means, motive and opportunity to originate Greek civilization. Chapter 2, Means, Motive and Opportunity to influence the formation of Greek civilization. Means. In order to establish that a person has performed a particular action, the taking place of which is in dispute, it is necessary to show that they were able to perform the action in the first place. The question here would be, were the Libyans, Egyptians and Phoenicians able to reach the Aegean Sea islands and mainland before 1500 BC? The following oceanographic observation is of interest. What evidence, however, is there for intercourse between the Libyan and the Aegean shores of that sea, as well as between the Nile folk and their neighbours? In the first place, the main sea current, after passing the coast of the Lebanon, sweeps round along the south coast of Asia Minor, and past Rhodes to the south side of Crete, and thence up the west coast of Greece and on past Sicily and Malta. The Egyptians discovered very early what they described as the Great Circuit or bend of the coast from Syria to Cilicia and had frequent intercourse with it, although more easily because the steady north winds of summer gave security of return from any point on this outward course, to an African shore, and thence with current and shore breeze back to the Nile, and the further west a ship went beyond the Cilician Gulf, the more certain it to make African land west rather than east of the delta, and so avoid featureless country. Best of all was it to go full circuit and make the southward turn where the distance from Crete to Cyrene was shortest, and the high profile of the Cyrenaic plateau gave sure landfall and ample warning to veer into the homeward current. Thus it was not only Nile folk, but all the coast people of Libya, who were in a positioned to make this grand tour of the very green sea, as the Egyptians called it. Who were the Greeks? By Sir John Linton Myers, University of California Press 1930 p. 220-221. This makes it quite clear that Libyans, with the right watercraft, could easily have reached the south side of Crete. It also shows that Phoenicians on the coast of Lebanon could have easily reached Cilicia, Rhodes and Crete, the very places associated with Phoenician colonization in the ancient traditions. Other places reached by the sea current such as Sicily and Malta are known to have been settled by the Phoenicians in the early 1st millennium BC. Figure 1. Cyrenaica is the African coast opposite Crete and Cilicia is the Asia Minor coast opposite Cyprus. In conclusion, we can say that Africans from around what later became Cyrenaica could have reached the Aegean lands, and in particular Crete, for as long as these currents have existed. In Black Summa, The African Origins of Civilization, by Hermel Hermstein, Pomegranate Publishing 2012, Chapter 6, we are told that today's oceanographic currents can be traced back to at least the end of the last ice age over 10,000 years ago. Did they have the sea-going vessels to reach the Aegean lands? The first explicit mention of Phoenician ships refers to a fleet of 40 merchant ships carrying cedar, which left a Phoenician port bound for Egypt around the year 3000 BC. From at least the middle of the 3rd millennium we have evidence of large merchant ships, the ships of Byblus on the open sea, trading with Egypt. Byblus, Tyre and Sidon had learnt all these techniques from Egypt, a country with a long shipping tradition that had grown out of travel on the Nile, principally by sail but using oars for auxiliary propulsion. The Phoenicians and the West, Politics, Colonies and Trade by Maria Eugenia Obert, Cambridge University Press 1993 p. 172. This shows that 2 of our 3 had the sea-going vessels capable of reaching the Aegean lands, and all 3 had the sea currents to help them along the way. We have therefore established that they had the means to reach these lands and have a formative influence on the development of their civilizations. Motive. What could have been the motive for undertaking such long and risky voyages? To begin with, the reputation of the Phoenicians as highly skilled and expert metal workers is well established in the Old Testament and in Homer. Phoenician bronze and silver bowls from Cyprus and the Mediterranean by Glenn Marco, University of California Press. 1985 6p. We also learn that evidence strongly suggests Phoenicians in the same metal-rich areas, Thessos, Euboea and Bactria, Laconia, Crete, and Rhodes. This coincidence of cult and craft maintains the chief dimensions in the Daedalus tradition. It is a related myth, the travels of Thmos in search of Europa, that follows closely the traces of Phoenician exploring in the Aegean. Daedalus and the Origins of Greek Art by Sarah P. Morris, University of Princeton Press 1992 p. 131. We thus have a solid motive for the exploration and even a correlation between known Phoenician exploration and the mythical journey of Thmos to find Europa. The known Phoenician exploration, the Old Testament, and Homer are all from the early 1st millennium BC, which is long after the time of the foundation of Minoan and Mycenaean civilization. In order to find a relevant motive, we need to find a much earlier period of metal rush. Metalworking and mining developed early in Egypt. In the Pyramid Age 2900–2450 BC, skilled metalworkers were producing ingenious bronze rip saws. Egyptian craftsmen made wide use of copper, as early as the 1st dynasty. Egyptians pioneered in the copper-rich Sinai Peninsula. They developed skill in copper smelting and compounding metals, evidently knowing the value of alloys. New Ungar's Bible Dictionary by Merrill F. Ungar, Moody Publishers 2009, 1. St. published 1967, under heading Metalworker. No page, no given. We also learned that Egypt's new metal industry was completely dependent on imports for tea, air raw materials, and that as a result, in Mesopotamia and Egypt, with limited copper resources, the search for metal became an impetus for imperialism, leading emerging city-states to explore and trade to obtain copper, and, later, tin. Warfare in the Ancient Near East to 1600 BC by William J. Hamblin, Chapter 1 Section, Weapons and the Origins of Metallurgy. Routledge 2013, no page, no given. We thus have a coinciding of motive and means between 3000 to 2600 BC for the Egyptians and Phoenicians. There are two more questions. 1. Where do the Libyans fit into all this? And 2. Were there any opportunities that arose to actually be in the Aegean? Opportunities for Africans. The African-American historian James Brunson proposed an interesting theory which would answer both. Around 3200 BC, Egypt is witness to a divided land. The south, Upper Egypt, characterizes the national temperament. To the north, Lower Egypt is dominated by a people unwilling to unify with its neighbor. The north was dominated by a people known as the Libyans. Some of the earliest settlers of Crete are recognized as Libyans from North Africa. The African Presence in the Ancient Mediterranean Isles and Mainland Greece by James Brunson, in African Presence in Early Europe, edited by Ivan van Sertima, Transaction Publishers 1985, 36 p. We cannot be 100% sure whether refugees from the unification were responsible for the transmission of Egypto-Libyan ideas to the Aegean. What we can be sure of is the appearance in Crete of a type of stone building which does not occur in Egypt, but is on the other hand widespread and very ancient both in North Africa and on other coasts of the western Mediterranean. This is the corbelled or false vaulted construction of the so-called beehive tombs. In early Minoan Crete, the primary graveyards with their separate interments close below the surface were economized and reused as soon as the bodies were decayed, and the bones, and any remains of the bodies were decayed, and the bones, and any remains of the tomb furniture that were recovered with them, were transferred to permanent charnel houses, constructed underground, lined with stone walling, and roofed with a beehive-shaped corbel vault narrowing to a single flat stone at the top. The more special connections between the pre-dynastic culture of Egypt and that of Crete, which have been discovered and recently analyzed by Sir Arthur Evans, valuable as they are as the first phases of an intercourse which came to be of the greatest importance later, do not go back very far in the long Neolithic series, still less in the Cyclades can they be shown to go back to the beginning even of the Bronze Age culture. They mark rather a fresh stage by revealing the growth of intercommunication between the South Aegean and a particular African region, the Nile Valley. Examples are the use of green malachite for face paint, the simple wooden bow, and the chisel-edged arrow for bringing down birds and small deer, the flexible ox-hide shield, for hunting big game as well as for war. The fine craftsmanship and characteristic forms of vessels in hard stone, the peculiar vessels of copper with no neck or rim, but a trough spout inserted in the shoulder. Common also to the early men of Egypt, Libya and Crete or at all events associated in Egypt with other Libyan connections are the lock of hair left long on one side of the head, the narrow pointed beard, and the peculiar loin-cloth and protective belt, common likewise to the women, the costumes variously elaborated from a blanket-like wrapper, open down the front from the neck, and folded over itself from the waist, quite different, therefore, from the apron shawl of primitive Babylonia. Myers 1930, p. 222-3. Much of this is confirmed by the talented British archaeologist John Pendlebury, who excavated Crete. The most frequently quoted examples of Egyptian or rather Libyan influence are the rather primitive statuettes from Messera. It seems the only theory which will explain certain factors in the Messera, the apparently bearded figurines, their cloaks and the sudden appearance of a circular type of tomb, perhaps thatched but almost certainly connected to the Marpalia of Libya. These features were practically confined to the Messera, where they shortly died out. Other trays, however, found more favour and spread all over the island. Evans has pointed out and illustrated the Libyanophy nitties of the Minoan side lock, the codpiece, and the plain bow with a broad-edged flint tip to the arrow, all of which persisted into later times. The Archaeology of Crete by John D. Pendlebury, Biblo and Tanner Publishers 1969, 1. St. published 1939, 74 p. The Messera was the southern part of Crete one would expect to arrive at if they travelled from the nearest part of Africa to Crete. The Libyan affinities occur exactly where we would expect them to. It is also clear that there was already a culture on Crete, but, as we shall see, it was not urban. The Libyan input should thus be seen as influence rather than founding. Libyans were, therefore, one element of the African blood running through the veins of ancient Cretans. The African influence did not end with the Libyan arrivals in the Messera. They continued into the Old Kingdom or Pyramid Age. Old Kingdom Egypt was at a different level of socio-political development from pre-palatial Crete. Old Kingdom Egypt can be characterized as a state society, ruled by a powerful political and economic elite presided over by the king. There was a flourishing literate bureaucracy, and centralized control over the procurement of raw materials and their redistribution, and over craft specialization. Crete, on the other hand, is characterized by relatively small, egalitarian village communities. Two main facets of this early trade can be identified: the movement of raw materials and the exchange of finished luxury goods. Alongside this, there is clear evidence for the transmission of technologies and esoteric knowledge, which might reflect closer interaction between the two societies. Based on the survival of archaeological material, Crete appears to be the main recipient of traded materials, whereas it is extremely difficult to document any Minoan goods in Egypt at this stage. The raw materials include a worked hippopotamus canine found in EMII levels at Knossos. Minoan craftsmen used imported hippopotamus ivory to make a number of artifacts, predominantly seals and pendants found in tombs in the plain of Messara and on the island of Moklos. Ostrich eggshells are found in apparent religious contexts in Emite, early Minoan, levels at Palekastro in eastern Crete and Mmia at Knossos. Other materials that were probably imported from Egypt include semi-precious stones, amethyst, carnelian, rock crystal and sardonyx. Egyptian stone vases have been identified at settlement levels at Knossos and in a Tholos tomb at Iatriada. Disc-shaped and globular faience beads are found in burials from Moklos and the tombs of the Messara in southern Crete. While the form of the beads and the faience technology are both Egyptian, it appears that these objects are of local Cretan manufacture. Therefore, alongside more concrete aspects of exchange, there is some evidence for the transmission of ideas from Egypt to Crete. Egypt and the Mediterranean W. All by Louis Steele, in The Egyptian World, edited by Toby Wilkinson, Routledge 2007. p. 460. The above passage leaves little doubt to the tremendous contribution that the advanced African civilization played in relation to developing the European-located culture through trade. It was the kind of trade that happens between two cultures where one has the status of teacher and the other of pupil. This continued into the Middle and New Kingdom. There can be no question of whether Africans took the opportunity to influence formative Crete. Afro-Canaanite opportunities. We are told, concerning Crete, by the archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans that this island became at such a very early date a centre of the glyptic art, and was thus able to produce the engraved designs on seals which eventually gave rise, by a gradual evolution, to a conventional system of writing. Further discoveries of Cretan and Aegean script, with Libyan and Proto-Egyptian comparisons by Arthur J. Evans, in Journal of Hellenic Studies Volume 17, 1897 p. 328. Egypt was influencing Crete before the latter developed writing. It raises an obvious question, the answer of which was given by Evans below. Although, however, various decorative motives in this primitive class of Cretan seals were due to Egyptian influence, it nevertheless appeared that the representations as a whole were of indigenous character, the later conventionalized pictographs showing perhaps a greater affinity to the Hittite characters of Anatolia and northern Syria than to the Egyptian. Evans 1897, p. 327. There appear to have been two influences, an initial Egyptian and an even stronger Anatolian or North Syrian one. This attracts our attention because the Afro-Canaanite world extended as far as North Syria, see unmistakably black sculpture and paintings from ancient Syria and Anatolia by Anu M. Bantu, Pomegranate Publishing 2013. Elsewhere Evans explicitly says the parallelism between certain Syrian types and those of Crete is certain. There is moreover a great deal besides in the figure or style of engraving of many of the Cretan stones which strongly recalls other primitive stones found on the easternmost Mediterranean coasts. The early Cretan relics may indeed be said to belong to the same East Mediterranean province of early glyptic design as many similar objects from Syria and Palestine. Cretan Pictographs and Pre-Phoenician Script by Arthur John Evans, Cambridge University Press 2013 66 p. This makes it clear that Afro-Canaanite designs influenced Cretan ones. Evans nonetheless concluded that the Cretan glyptic art was indigenous although Canaanite influenced. Decades later other authorities commenting on Cretan pictographic script and linear, the Cretan script, were to be more decisive. Former identifications of Semitic words in linear, first offered by Cyrus Gordon since 1957 and later by his pupil Robert Stiglitz and the author, do deserve some consideration. After a struct Ural analysis of several variants of the full standard linear libation formula, the language of both Cretan pictographic variants and their linear descendants may be defined as Old Phoenician. The oldest scripts in Crete, derivation, development, decipherment by Jan Best, ancient scripts from Crete and Cyprus. Edited by Jan Best and Fred Woutuizan, E. J. Brill 1988 26 p. The above scholar even felt confident enough, based on his evidence, to identify the particular parts of Canaan that the various scripts originated from. The Phoenician town of Byblus had its own local pictographic script, which was succeeded by its own local linear descendant, as we have seen, and we could trace back at least one Cretan pictographic variant via its linear descendant to Ras Shamra Ugarit, the linear script on 3 clay tablets from the sanctuary at Inlander Allah. Shows such a likeness with several linear variants in Crete that a close connection between the two scripts is very probable indeed. Best 1988, 27 p. The Cretan pictographic script and linear variants date from 2000 to 1600 BC. We can, therefore, conclude that opportunities were taken from 2000 BC onwards to influence the development of writing on Crete. Writing is one of the most important developments in the urbanization process of any culture. The information in this chapter shows that the Libya Egyptians, Old Kingdom Egyptians and Afro-Canaanites had the means, motive and opportunities to play teacher to the incipient Cretan culture. It also shows that the archaeological evidence supports the broad outline of the ancient traditions which claim Egyptians and Phoenicians played a formative role in the development of Europe's first civilization. Chapter 3, The Mycenaean Civilization. Introduction. Figure 2. Mycenaean Greece. Thebes was located halfway between Athens and Glo. According to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the following is a summary about the Mycenaean civilization. Mycenaean is the term applied to the art and culture of Greece from ca. 1600 to 1100 BC. The name derives from the site of Mycenae in the Peloponnese, where once stood a great Mycenaean fortified palace. During the Mycenaean period, the mainland enjoyed an era of prosperity centered in such strongholds as Mycenae, Tiryns, Thebes and Athens. Contact with Minoan Crete played a decisive role in the shaping and development of Mycenaean culture, especially in the arts. Besides being bold traders, the Mycenaeans were fierce warriors and great engineers who designed and built remarkable bridges, fortification walls, and beehive-shaped tombs, all employing cyclopean masonry and elaborate drainage and irrigation systems. http://www.metmuseum.org/to/mice/hd_mice.htm. Other Mycenaean forts included Argos, Pylos and Myde. It is important to point out that the Peloponnese is the southernmost peninsula of Greece, indicating the direction from which urban influence reached Europe. The people of this culture were the first mainlanders of Greece to become literate. A syllabic script called Linear B, descended from Linear of Crete, was used by them. Each fortification was based around a palace, the central feature of which was a great hall or megaron. Egyptian influence. The Mycenaean civilization was discovered by Heinrich Schliemann in the late 19th century. It was the first civilization on mainland Greece. Schliemann used the poems of Homer, which were essentially myths, to locate the sites of Troy in Anatolia and Mycenae in Greece. When Schliemann published the volume Mycenae, detailing his discoveries in Greece, the British MP, the Right Honourable William Ewart Gladstone, wrote the foreword, "I find, upon perusing the volume of Dr. Schliemann, that the items of evidence, which connect his discoveries generally with the Homeric poems, are more numerous than I had surmised from the brief outline with he favoured us upon his visit to England in the spring. He presents to us the rude figures of cows, and upon a signet ring, number 531, and elsewhere, cow heads not to be mistaken." He then points to the traditional worship, from the first, of Hera in Argolis, and he asks us to connect these facts with the use of Bupis, cow-eyed, as a staple epithet of this goddess in the poems. We know that upon some of the Egyptian monuments the goddess Isis, mated with Osiris, is represented in a human figure with the cow's head. This was a mode of exhibiting deity congenial to the spirit of an Egyptian immigration, such as might, compatibly with the text of Homer, have taken place some generations before the Trojan War. Mycenae, a narrative of researches and discoveries at Mycenae and Tiryns by Heinrich Schliemann, with foreword by W. Gladstone, MP, Cambridge University Press 2010, 1. St. Published 1878, p. The connection with Isis creates a full circle in our understanding of Io turning into a white heifer and giving birth to black Epaphos, the Apis bull of Memphis. This is because the cow that gave birth to the Apis was also venerated and associated with Isis as a divine mother. Egyptian Mythology, A to Z by Pat Relmer, Infobase Publishing 2010 20p. We also know that the new Apis bull was always crowned at the full moon. The lunar association explains why the heifer was white. Such a situation could only have arisen if the religion of the Mycenaean Greeks had an Egyptian foundation. Given the obvious and admitted formative Egyptian contribution to Crete, we should expect the same for the mainland. Evidence for Egyptian tutelage is also reported by Schliemann. The remarkable grotto in Delos, at the foot of Kynthos, is probably a branch foundation from Crete in the heyday of its power, for the structural system off the very peculiar roof, composed in a masterly manner of 10 great counterfort stones, certainly came from Egypt, whose gigantic buildings, with their enormous superincumbent weight, compelled men at an EA.RLY time to solve that kind of constructive problem. This roof, which was able to carry a small mountain, proves what men had seen and learned in Egypt. It affords another useful support for the theory, started by others, of a very early influence from Egypt, a theory derived from gems, as well as from the discovery of an ornamental ostrich egg and sea, found in the Perseid graves. Schliemann, Tyrins, The Prehistoric. 1878 1. St. Published, 2010 pl. Dr. Schliemann also observed more Egyptian influence at Tyrins a couple of pages later. On the other hand, on the side of the characteristic system of fortifications, with its dry moat, its escarped wall substructions, its flanking towers, and the antique building method of forming all the walls in citadel and house of sun-dried bricks and wooden tie-beams, is of very peculiar importance. First, because all of these features prevail in Egypt, both in the Delta and in Upper Egypt. Secondly, because the walls of the palace at Tyrins still were of a like or a similar structure. This method, then, was widely used, and long maintained from practical as well as economical grounds. Schliemann, 2010 pl. At this point it is worth recapping the ancient tradition which is relevant to Mycenae. It seems to have been treated as common knowledge in classical times that in an earlier heroic age a leader named Danaos had come out of Egypt and landed in the Argolid. Danaos belongs to the earliest phase of the heroic age. He was the ancestor of Danae, herself an eponymous figure, known to Homer as the mother of Perseus, and Perseus is in all tradition the founder of Mycenae and an ancestor of Heracles and of Eurystheus, and who was succeeded on the throne of Mycenae by the Pelopids, the dynasty in power at the time of the Trojan War. The Rise of Mycenaean Civilization by Frank H. Stubbings, Cambridge University Press, 1963 12p. It should be restated that Perseus was married to Andromeda, Princess of Ethiopia. The capital of this Ethiopia was Joppa in modern-day northern Israel. The Canaanites of these parts were obviously considered Ethiopians. The last sentence of the above quotation is a reference to the replacement of the Egyptian-descended rulers of Mycenae with new arrivals from Asia Minor, the Pelopids. If this is so, we should expect to see two groups of aristocracy depicted in Mycenaean art, one looking Egyptian and the other Eurasian. We shall see whether there is anything in the art that fulfills this expectation. Afro-Canaanite influence. We should also remind ourselves of what the traditions say about the foundation of the Mycenaean stronghold of Thebes. From his home in Syria, Phoenicia, he is supposed to have come first to Samothrace and later to Bactria, where he settled at Thebes. That city in heroic legend is regularly Cadmea, the city of Cadmus, and its people Cadmeans. His eastern origin is at first sight implausible as that of Danaos, and must equally involve the Mori of a historical reality, even though we cannot at present relate it to archaeological evidence. Stubbings 1963, p. 13-14. Despite what we have just been told, there would appear to be at least some archaeological evidence. As early as the 2nd millennium BC, Cretan and Mycenaean merchants frequented Phoenician cities and even established their trading stations there. At about the same time, the Phoenicians, in turn, settled on the island of Thasos. They even penetrated the Greek mainland, for example, to Thebes in Bottia. Archaeological discoveries in Thebes indicate that relations existed with the East in the 14th century, thus confirming that there is a grain of truth in the myths attributing the foundation of Thebes to the Phoenician Kmus. Phoenician and Greek colonization by U.B. Sirkin, in Early Antiquity, edited by M. Diakonov, University of Chicago Press. 1991 p. 347. When the historian Michael C. Astor wanted to counter-claim that no archaeological evidence for Kmos had ever been found in Thebes, he said, Cadmia, accidentally, is totally buried under the modern city of Thebes. An extraordinary hoard of Syrian and Babylonian cylinder seals has been discovered in the ruins of the Cadmeian Palace during the only archaeological digging in the area since 1921. This does testify to quite some traces of Phoenician influence. Hellenosmitica, an ethnic and cultural study in West Semitic impact on Mycenaean Greece by Michael C. Astor, E. J. Brill. 1969 p. 390. This essentially confirms an Afro-Canaanite presence in the very part of Greece, at the very period mentioned in the ancient traditions. Astor also introduced another aspect of detecting foreign influence. Without many men and a lasting domination over the country, the Semitic newcomers would not have been able to impose on Bottia so thoroughly and for so long a time, so many of their names, vocabulary, beliefs and cults. Astor 1969, p. 224. These observations go back to the time of Schliemann himself, who wrote, again, the appearance of Semitic names of places in the immediate neighborhood of Tyrians, as for example Megara. From Heb. Symb. Cave, and Salamis, from Heb. Symb. Safety, can only be explained by the supposition of Semitic colonization. In like manner, the name Ithaca points to a Phoenician settlement, being a Semitic word, of the same root as Utica, and meaning settlement or colony. I here particularly note the Cyclopean walls, more or less preserved in many parts of Ithaca, which in the old capital of the island, on Mount Aetos, are of enormous dimensions, and very like those of Tyrians. Schliemann, 2010 Tyrians, p. 23-4. Tom F. R. G. Braun was a lecturer in ancient history at the University of Oxford. He theorized that 4 Mycenaean Greek words, read from syllabic linear B, were borrowed from Phoenician. Linear B Phoenician meaning Ki to Ktn tunic. Ku Ru so hours gold. Ku Mino Kamen, Hebrew, Kamen. Sas Mrmn sesame. Why? LST This is interesting. There is an urgent need for the entire Linear B vocabulary to be compared to Hebrew and Phoenician. As a matter of course. Schliemann reveals what many thought of Mycenaean architectural skills when he told us the esteem in which Tyrians was held. It was held in the highest veneration as the birthplace of Heracles, and was famed for its Cyclopean walls, which in ancient days were regarded as a miracle. Pausanias indeed places them side by side with the pyramids of Egypt. Schliemann, 2010, Tyrians, 16p. Heracles was born in Tyrians and was originally thought of as black and Egyptian, see Fig 41. Who were these master builders? Who engineered architectural masterpieces to rival the greatest wonder of the world? Figure 3 painting on pottery of men in a horse-drawn chariot, Eolysos, 1200 BC. There are 4 men in the painted pottery above and all have black faces with varying degrees of long noses. The wavy pattern of hair above the head suggests short, curly hair, unlike that of most Minoans. It was found in a tomb dating back to 1200 BC. From Mycenaean levels at Elissos, Rhodes. Schliemann said of this place. According to Diodorus, v. 56, the population of Elissos was partly Greek and partly Phoenician, v. 58. Though excavations of Kaimeros and Elissos have proved how deep the Phoenician influence must have been in both places. The pottery of Elissos has the greatest similarity to that of Tiryns and Mycenae. Schliemann, 2010, 27p. We read the prominent-nosed black folk Phoenicians. Figure 4 detail of painting showing black faces of the men. Figure 5 pottery painting of rider in horse-drawn chariot 1350 to 1300 BC. Above is a decorated bowl with a painting of a horse-drawn chariot and riders. It is from a Mycenaean tomb at Enchome, Cyprus, dating back to the 14th century BC, the peak of Mycenaean power. It is thought to depict a funerary procession or parade. The 4 people depicted here all have dark brown faces. Below is the detail of the face of the man following the chariot. It shows a dark brown face with quite a long nose and curly hair. Figure 6 detail of man behind chariot. Figure 7 black-figured man and woman thought to be Helen of Troy and Paris, 720 BC. This large pot dates from between 735 BC and 720 BC and is from Thebes. It depicts a man holding a well-built woman's wrist as he tries to make her board one of his sea-going ships. Both are shown black in color and with protruding noses like on the Mycenaeans. The woman's individual locks of hair can be seen cascading down her neck. Are these dreadlocks? The scene is reminiscent of the story of the Trojan War reported by Homer, specifically the kidnap of Helen by Paris, the Prince of Troy. The importance of this depiction is it probably shows how later Greeks viewed the Mycenaean physical appearance. Figure 8 detail of jutting chins and noses of the black figures. Figure 9 painted pot from Mycenaean period showing more people with black faces, 1300 to 1200 BC. Figure 10 detail of black-faced figures, curly hair can be seen. The depiction above is on a type of pot known to archaeologists as a crater. It shows 2 figures in a chariot plus a rider controlling 2 horses. A sword-bearer follows behind. All 4 are shown with black faces and curly hair, indicating that the hair type is genetic and not individual. The noses are prominent like in many Mycenaean depictions but downward pointing. Here. Figure 11 wall painting of musician playing a lyre, 13th century BC. The palace at Pylos is known as the Palace of Nestor after the Homeric reference to a king who lived at this citadel. In the 14th and 13th centuries BC, this became the main urban center of the Mycenaean world. It was destroyed by a fire around 1200 BC, leading to the preservation of the palace and its wall frescoes such as the one above. The fresco itself, in style, is reminiscent of Minoan paintings. The dark brown complexion of the musician is in contrast to the cream long robe and the white of the eyes. The hair is black and long like the dominant element in the Cretan population. The physical type is similar to the numerically dominant dark element in the South Indian population. It raises the question of whether the Anatolian population that peopled Crete in the Neolithic was of Dravidian Physica L-type. A similar type is seen among the people of North Africa. Were these the descendants of the Libyans? Figure 12 AM group of suspected Mycenaean soldiers depicted in ancient Egypt 1340 BC. The depiction above is on Middle New Kingdom Egyptian papyri from Tel El Amarna, which show foreign soldiers with what appear to be helmets made from boar's tusks. These helmets were typical of what Mycenaean soldiers used to wear. They are shown with the same complexions as the ancient Egyptians, an African brown. This automatically makes them black people. Figure 13 Thrans and Mycenaeans on a crotiri, 1500 BC. This fresco is from a crotiri on the island of Thera and shows soldiers with lances, cowhide gowns and boar tusk helmets. They are believed to be Mycenaeans and are shown an African brown like the fallen Thrans at the bottom of the painting. Almost all the people depicted in the scene are obviously black. Schliemann tells us. The same may be said of Thera, of which Bertian writes, Greek tradition tells that Kmos, seeking his abducted sister Europa, landed on the island then called Callist, and built a shrine to Poseidon and Athene, and left there a number of companions under the command of Membliaros, son of Poikiles. These Phoenicians, as the story seems to indicate by the name Poikiles, the variegator, established a branch of industry, which flourished later at Thera, the making of many coloured stuffs, known to the Greeks from their place of manufacture as the Rhaetia. 8 generations after Membliaros, the story goes on, the Cadmeian Theras, son of Ortigan, led a band of Minyans from Laconia to the island, where the descendants of Membliaros gave him control, and he called it Thera after himself. Schliemann, 2010, 26p. One wonders whether the scene being depicted above in Figure 13 is not the changeover referred to in the ancient tradition as the Afro-Canaanite descended Membliaros descendants giving control to the equally Afro-Canaanite descended Cadmeian Theras. Figure 14 White Mycenaean soldiers, do they represent the Pelopid dynasty from Asia Minor? The end of the Mycenaean civilization? 3 factors contributed to the end of this civilization. The first was the war against Troy in the 12th century BC, fought when a non-Perseid dynasty had taken over the Mycenaeans. This war depleted the nation of resources. After the Trojan War, internal strife broke out between the cities of Greece, further depleting their resources. A series of devastating earthquakes led to the general collapse of civilization in the Bronze Age Mediterranean, the displacement of whole nations, the collapse of trade and attacks of the sea peoples. The civilization collapsed and the art of writing was lost. Chapter 4, Black Civilization in the 1st millennium BC. The colonizing period. The collapse of Mycenaean civilization at the end of the 2nd millennium BC had population dispersing consequences that were to shape the future of ancient Greece as we come to know it. Soon after this Trojan War, we find the country involved in fatal civil wars, in which the people, under a number of petty chieftains hostile to each other, suffered extremely from calamity and oppression. These evils seem to have led to the change in the form of government, and the substitution of the popular instead of the regal system. Though same evils also probably contributed to the spirit of emigration, which so strikingly marks the period. The emigrants who sought foreign settlements were of 3 separate classes. The earliest were the Aeolians, who removed from the Peloponnesus to the northwestern shores of Asia Minor and founded several cities, of which Smyrna was the principal. The second were the Ionians, who went from Attica, originally called Ionia, and planted themselves in Asia Minor, south of the Aeolians, where Ephesus was one of their chief cities. The third were the Dorians, who migrated to Italy and Sicily, and founded numerous flourishing settlements. Syracuse in Sicily became the most important. In the period of colonization we notice the origin of the four principal dialects in the Greek language. Eschenberg 1836, p. 640. The descendants of the Afro-Canaanites, as with any ancient prestigious group, were in leadership positions. They used the sailing and colonizing knowledge of their Afro-Canaanite ancestors to migrate to different parts of the Aegean world. The majority of Greeks that embarked on these migrations, beginning around 1000 BC, were white. Where the Greeks were coming from places like the Peloponnesus and Bottiaea, surviving black elements in the population would have been part of the migrations. In this connection we discover that Aeolians also came from Bottiaea, children of Achilles, the Greeks in Asia Minor since the days of Troy by John Freely, IB Taurus 2010-11p, which was associated with Afro-Canaanite colonization. The Aeolians also settled the island of Lesbos, where one of the most famous poets of the ancient world came. Of women intellectuals in the ancient world, Sappho, or Sappho in her own Aeolian dialect, is certainly best known. Her poetry was famed in her own time, and for centuries after she was regarded as the equal of Homer, even as the 10th muse. Sappho was sometimes described as small and dark, as in the Oxyine Chus papyrus of the late 2nd or early 3rd century. Ovid's poem Sappho to Phaon, which may have been partly based on poems of her own lost, suggests she may have been black. Brown Iam, an Ethiopian dame, inspired by young Perseus with a generous flame. Women's Political and Social Thought, an anthology edited by H. L. Smith and B. A. Carroll, Indiana University Press 2009 p. The first line of the words placed in the mouth of Sappho, by the later Roman poet Ovid, make it clear she was intended to be black. The second line is interesting because Perseus loved Andromeda, princess of Ethiopia. As we have already stated, this Ethiopia was in what is currently northern Israel with its capital at Joppa. Andromeda was a Phoenician princess, and it is Perseus' love for her that Sappho is comparing with Phaon's love for herself. This is particularly interesting given that she is Aeolian and some Aeolians had Phoenician Bottiaean ancestry. She obviously had the reason of color, black, and ethnicity, Canaanite, to identify with Andromeda. Judging from later Greek art, the Ionians and Dorians also had black elements in their population. The geometric period. The Metropolitan Museum of Art gives us a definition of the geometric period of ancient Greece. The roots of classical Greece lie in the geometric period of about ca. 900 to 700 BC, a time of dramatic transformation that led to the establishment of primary Greek institutions. The Greek city-state, polis, was formed. The Greek alphabet was developed, and new opportunities for trade and colonization were realized in cities founded along the coast of Asia Minor, in southern Italy, and in Sicily. With the development of the Greek city-states came the construction of large temples and sanctuaries dedicated to patron deities, which signaled the rise of state religion. Each polis identified with its own legendary hero. By the end of the 8th century BC, the Greeks had founded a number of major pan-Hellenic sanctuaries dedicated to the Olympian gods. http://www.metmuseum.org/to/hd/to/hd_grge.htm. These ancient Greek achievements we read a direct result of the reintroduction of the Phoenicians into the Aegean world. By the early 1st millennium BC, the Phoenicians were a mixture of Afro-Canaanites and Euro-Canaanites. This was because the Geographical divisions between Canaanites with West Semitic names and those with European names had collapsed with the end of the Bronze Age. The Euro-Canaanites were Baal worshipping and followed Sethic practices like sacred prostitution and man-to-man relationships. The Afro-Canaanites had originally been El worshippers like the Exodus Hebrews, see the Black God and Goddess of the Bible, The African Fight for Western Asia by Gert Muller, Pomegranate Publishing 2013. When Sethic practices make their appearance in Greece, we naturally assign them to Euro-Canaanite influence. One of the more important Phoenician contributions was the alphabet. The adaptation by the Greeks of the letters of the Phoenician alphabet to express vowels as well as consonants is one of the most important events in world history. The Greek tradition that the alphabet came from Phoenicia is confirmed by the name, Greek symbols, almost certainly meaning Phoenician letters. This is illustrated by the Greek names of the letters of the alphabet. They were originally words with Semitic meanings. The Greeks learned these names by rote without understanding them, and must have imported the names, along with letters in the 8th century BC. Braun 1968, p. 25-28. The very idea of colonization came from the first Phoenician or Afro-Canaanite influence. Asia Minor and Sicily, in particular, were places the Phoenicians were colonizing in the 9th century BC. We have just seen how the Greek alphabet was adapted from the Phoenician one. The Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries to the Olympian gods established during the geometric period also have a Phoenician connection. During the last 25 years of the 19th century, a number of isolated Oriental bowls were discovered in shrines of ancient Greece, Olympia, Delphi, Athens, and Rhenia. Phoenician bronze and silver bowls from Cyprus and the Mediterranean by Glenn Marco, University of California Press. 1985 1p. This Phoenician influence in the religious realm is as sensitive as it is crucial. Walter Burkert observed in this connection, the foreign elements remain subject to a policy of containment. There is hardly a standard textbook that has Oriental and Greek objects depicted side by side. Many of the Oriental finds in the great Greek sanctuaries have long remained, and some still remain unpublished. The fact that Olympia is the most significant location for finds of Eastern bronzes, richer in this respect than all the Middle Eastern sites, is seldom mentioned. The Orientalizing Revolution, Near Eastern Influence on Greek Culture in the Early Archaic Age by Walter Burkert. Translated by Margaret E. Pinder and Walter Burkert, Harvard University Press 1995 4p. It is little known facts like this W. Hitch astound the reader and leave no doubt as to the depth of influence and the concerted attempt to conceal the information. Why would there be such a strong Phoenician presence in the sanctuaries and shrines? The degree of evidence strongly suggests that they were founded by Phoenicians, possibly in the Afro-Canaanite period. We are told of one of the most famous of such shrines in Greece. The Oracle of Apollo at Delphi, Greece, is an important symbol of wisdom in Western literature. It is the most famous of the ancient oracle's sources of divine data. That the world-famed Delphi is named for a Negro is a carefully shrouded secret. Mythology books in the English language tell us that Delphi means dolphin and that the area's first settler arrived from Crete astride a dolphin's back. Delphos of Delphi by Eloise McKinney Johnson, in Journal of Negro History Volume 67 No. 3 1982 p. 279. Crete makes us think of a Phoenician connection since they were connected to this island, though Europa and her 3 sons, who became kings. But what is the evidence that the eponymous founder of Delphi was black? As a coin type, this head is so extraordinary that it is only natural to bring it into relationship with the other coins, almost contemporary, which bears the same type. These are little silver pieces of Delphi, with heads of goats or rams and the letters, Greek symbols, on the reverse, and with a Negro's head as obverse type. The head has been identified as that of Phos, son of Melina, the black woman, mythical founder of Delphi. The coin belongs to the Cleisthenic age, probably to the time when the Alcmaeonidae had just completed the temple of Apollo at Pytho. Thus the Alcmaeonid Cleisthenes as the new founder of Delphi's temple placed upon the Athenian money the head of the first founder of Delphi itself. Athens, its history and coinage before the Persian invasion by Charles Theodore Seltman, Cup Archives 1924-97 p. This strongly suggests that as late as the geometric period some Phoenicians were still of African, as opposed to mixed appearance. The other famous Greek oracle in ancient times was at Dodona. Herodotus in Book 2 of his Histories informed us about the story related by the priestesses of Zeus at Dodona of two black doves which flew from Thebes in Upper Egypt and went to Libya and Dodona in northwestern Greece. The birds perched on trees and spoke with a human voice declaring that a shrine to Amun should be built there. Herodotus also concludes that the doves represented priestesses, and, as doves are not usually black, the color simply denotes that the women who were taken from Thebes were Egyptians. The oracle at Dodona was thus founded by a black priestess of Amun from Thebes, according to the tradition. The Orientalizing period. The architecture, art, jewelry and ceramics of classical Greece were the result of known and acknowledged Phoenician and Egyptian influence during the Orientalizing period fr. About 650 BC. We are told concerning art that the impact of Phoenician art upon that of Greece can be clearly seen in the diversity of objects and shapes inspired by or directly imitative of Phoenician models. In the medium of bone and ivory, we may draw attention to relevant material from a number of sites, including Athens, Parakara, and Sparta. Marco 1985, p. 117. Concerning jewelry we learn of the extent to which Greek jewelry borrows from and directly imitates the Phoenician repertoire, both in shape and technique, has been well demonstrated by Higgins, Cullican, and others. As will become evident, there is sufficient evidence to suggest that the techniques of filigree and granulation both derived ultimately from Phoenician practice. Marco 1985, p. 118. Concerning ceramics we are told by the same source. The impact of the bowls and related Phoenician imports upon the emerging Greek ceramic traditions of the Orientalizing period is equally discernible. For the purposes of this study, we will restrict our examination to two major schools, i.e. Attic and Corinthian. Marco 1985, p. 118. The Attic and Corinthian are the two main schools of classical Greek art on various ceramic forms such as amphorae. It is from these traditions that the black figure styles originate, with black being used for males and white being used for females. It may be explained by the leading members of society at the dawn of urban society being the predominantly male Afro-Canaanite and Egyptian settlers taking Greek wives. The memory of this may have caused the colors to become conventionalized in the preceding centuries. This would also explain why the Greeks associated a white complexion with femininity and a black complexion with masculinity. Concerning classical Greek architecture we are told of Egyptian influence by Encyclopaedia Britannica. From about 650 on, the Greeks began to visit Egypt regularly, and their observation of the monumental stone buildings there was the genesis of the ultimate development of monumental architecture and sculpture in Greece. The first step in architecture was simply the replacement of wooden pillars with stone ones and the translation of the carpentry and brick structural forms into stone equivalents. http://www.britannica.com/eb-forward/topic/32952/western-architecture/47288//orientalizing-period#sign-ref488//. There can be no doubt about the profound influence from Phoenicia and Egypt in all crucial areas of civilization in classical Greece. We can also see that the influence itself is acknowledged by some in Western academia, but there is no unanimous acceptance of the black origins of this formative influence. Chapter 5: Black Cyprus. People on Cyprus have a variety of ethnic origins, according to their own traditions. Salamis, Athens, Arcadia, Cythnos, Phoenicia, and Ethiopia are all mentioned. The Histories by Herodotus, 7.90. In Greek mythology, Cyprus was the land of the goddess Aphrodite. It has fertile land and plentiful timber and copper resources. Because of this, the major powers of antiquity all wanted to control the island. In the mid to late 2nd millennium BC, the Mycenaeans had a strong presence on the island. By 1000 BC, city kingdoms had formed. Around 800 BC, the Phoenicians settled the city of Sicyon and it became their colony. Around 700 BC, the Assyrians arrived and claimed Cyprus for Assyria. This domination lasted until 663 BC. http://www.britannica.com/eb-forward/topic/14857/cyprus/33819//bronze-age. In the 6th century BC, the Egyptians came to Cyprus as conquerors. The literary records of the brief century of Egyptian domination are scanty. If we are to believe Diodorus, Hophra, who reigned from 588 to 569, and whom the Greeks knew as Apries, made an expedition with a strong fleet and army against Cyprus and Phoenicia, defeated their combined forces in a great sea fight, and returned with much spoil to Egypt. His successor Ahmose II, Amasis, 569–525 BC, reduced the cities of Cyprus and made noteworthy dedications in its temples. A History of Cyprus by George Hill, Cambridge University Press, 2010, 1. St. Published 1940, p. 109. This rule was not without influence, particularly in statuary. Direct Egyptian influence was not always apparent, but many limestone sculptures reproduced Egyptian conventions in dress, and some statues were directly inspired by Egyptian models. http://www.britannica.com/eb-forward/topic/14857/cyprus/33819//bronze. Age. City kingdoms were established from about 1000 BC. One of these cities was Idalion. It had a religious sanctuary consisting of an open-air enclosure, cult rooms, chapels and storerooms. Votive limestone statues were left in the sanctuary to make prayers for the donor. Larger votive statues reflected the wealth of important worshippers. Below we shall take a look at who these important worshippers were, dating from 700 BC to 50 BC. Some statues show strong Egyptian influence in pose and style, reflecting the Egyptian rulership in the 6th century BC. These statues were called kuroi. Figure 15, votive limestone statue from Idalion, Cyprus. Figure 16, another votive statue from Idalion. Figure 17, this statue shows Egyptian influence in its pose and facial features. Figure 18, dignitary from Idalion, ancient Cyprus. Figure 19, another dignitary from Idalion, ancient Cyprus. The two votive statues representing the important worshippers shown here both have African features and very curly hair. The other Cypriot statues show similar faces and hair. In this instance both Egypt and Canaan are likely to be the origin of the Africans concerned. The Egyptians ruled Cyprus during the 6th century BC. Egyptian and Greek styles of sculpture were combined on the island. Below is the contrast of the rich brown color of one type of ancient Cypriot with another type on the island but of European, Mediterranean appearance. The rich brown Cypriot has a narrower nose than is usual, but has very curly hair, the length and representation of which looks like an afro. Figure 20 colored sculpture of ancient Cypriot. Figure 21 ancient Cypriot of European, Mediterranean appearance. Figure 22 ancient Cypriot of semi-Moorish appearance. Figure 23 limestone male head from 3rd century BC Cyprus. Figure 24 hair and beard show clear evidence of African descent on Cypriot dignitary. Figure 25 Cypriot man with distinct African ancestry looking rather like Ronaldinho. Figure 26 Brazilian footballer Ronaldinho of obvious African ancestry. Zeno was the founder of one of the two main philosophical schools of his day, the Stoics. They were renowned for their discipline and forsaking of pleasure as the counterparts of the Epicureans who believed in indulging the senses to the maximum. We are told the following about him. Zeno was the son of Inasius, a native of Sicyon, in Cyprus, which is a Grecian city, partly occupied by a Phoenician colony. Apollonius, the Tyrian, says that he was thin, very tall, of a dark complexion, in reference to which someone once called him an Egyptian clematis, climbing plant. The Lives and Opinions of Eminent Philosophers, Life of Zeno, edited by H. L. Smith and B. A. Carroll, Indiana University Press. 2000. http://www.fordham.edu/halsall/ancient/Book 7-Stoics.asp. This shows that wherever Phoenician colonies were set up, famous Greeks, often cited as having Afro-Canaanite ancestry, were to be found who were either compared to Egyptians or Ethiopians. Chapter 6. The East Greeks of Asia Minor. The Greeks who settled in Western Asia Minor were known as East Greeks. Around 1000 BC, Aeolian immigrants from the Peloponnesus and Bactria settled the old city of Troy and called it Ilion. As we have already seen, some of them were of Phoenician ancestry. By the 5th century BC it was famously known by this name. Below are some votive statues of the East Greeks from 3rd century BC Ilion. Figure 27 votive statue of man from Ilion, 3rd century BC. Figure 28 votive statue of lady from Ilion, 3rd century BC. Figure 29 terracotta mold for a female head, Rhodes, 625 BC. Fig. U30 white and semi-Moorish East Greeks. Figure 31 terracotta statue of boy from Myrina, Asia Minor 50 BC. Figure 32 terracotta statue of Aphrodite fixing a crown over the African curls of Dionysus, Myrina, 150 BC. The fragments of vases above, in Figure 30, depict white and semi-Moorish East Greeks dating back to 600 BC. The lower example is wearing a red fez. The two statues above were found in Myrina in northwest Asia Minor. One is a terracotta statue of a boy with straight hair, but African-like face suggesting black ancestry. It dates from between 50 BC and 30 AD. The other is a terracotta statue of the goddess Aphrodite and the god Dionysius. The goddess, who looks European, fixes a crown or wreath over the African curls of Dionysius. It dates from between 150 BC and 100 BC. Chapter 7, Beutia and Athens. Below are depictions on a large vase, from Athens, in black figure. Athens is in Attica, not Beutia, but the profiles of the black mercenaries can be compared with the depiction below of Circe, daughter of the sun god. The Greek soldier is depicted with typically Greek facial features and hair dropping below his helmet. He is shown black after the color of men in this style. He has a mercenary in front of him. We know the mercenary is not Greek for a number of reasons. He is shown smaller than the Greek soldier, indicating that he is a foreigner. 2. He has an African appearance of hair and features and not the conventional hair and features of the Greek soldier. He is possibly of North African origin because Greek contacts with Africa went no further than the north. 3. He is also armed with a club, which was not the standard Greek armament for soldiers. A foreigner would only be amongst them for 3 reasons: as a member of the enslaved, to trade, or as a mercenary. Only one of these would be permitted to carry arms. Figure 33. Emperor black figures of Greek soldier with possibly North African mercenaries. Athens 540 BC. Figure 34. The mercenary behind the Greek soldier. Figure 35. Black-figured Skyphos with Circe, daughter of the sun, and Odysseus. Beutia 450 BC. Above 2 characters from Greek myth are shown together on a skyphos or drinking cup. The lady is Circe, daughter of the Helios, and Paeus, the sun god and nymph of the great ocean respectively. Circe's siblings are Eetes, king of Colchis, Pasiphae, wife of King Minos of Crete, and Paeus, mythical ancestor of the Persians. See unmistakably black sculpture and paintings of the first Persians. The ethnic groups associated with Circe's family, Minoans, Colchians and Persians, are of black origins. It is not surprising that Circe herself is shown with the same African features of the mercenaries in figure 33 and 34. She is also shown black in color, which is unusual for a woman. Circe was a sorceress who could turn men into animals. Odysseus was a Greek hero who fought in the Trojan War. All this gives the impression the ancient Greeks perceived of the gods as being of African physical appearance. Figure 36. Terracotta woman from Beutia 300 BC. Figure 37. Thought to be Aphrodite and Eros 300 BC. Beutia or Thessaly. Figure 38. The god Dionysius, in Kabiric style, holding a drinking vase, 520 BC, Athens. Figure 39. Stone sculpture of woman from the Temple of Ars, Athens, 420 BC. Figure 40. Athenian man of the 5th century BC, perhaps Socrates. It is interesting that the above 3 distinctive representations all come from Beutia, because this region of Greece was the place of the temple of the Kabir. Who were the Kabir or Kabiri? Kabir, Kabr. Myth. Certain deities originally worshipped with mystical rites by the Pelasgians in Lemnos and Samothrace and afterwards throughout Greece, also called sons of Hephaestus, or Vulcan, as being masters of the art of working metals. http://www.freedictionary.com/kbroy. Hephaestus was the great Olympian god of fire, metalworking, stone masonry and the art of sculpture. He was usually depicted as a bearded man, holding hammer and tongs, the tools of a smith, and riding a donkey. http://www.thea.com/olympios/hephaestus.html. They were the sons of Hephaestus and Kabiro, a nymph who was daughter of the sea god. They were also the gods of the Pelasgians of Samothrace and Lemnos. Herodotus mentions the physical appearance of the Kabiri when describing the acts of Sacrilege committed by the Persian king Cambyses, who even entered the temple of Hephaestus and jeered at the god's statue. This statue closely resembles the Pateiasai, which the Phoenicians carry about on the prows of their triumphs, but I should make it clearer to anyone who has never seen these, if I said it was like a pygmy. He also entered the temple of the Kabiri, which no one but the priest is allowed to do, made fun of the images there. They resemble those of Hephaestus, and are supposed to be his sons. Herodotus, the histories translated by Aubrey de Salincert and John Marincola, Penguin Books 2003 p. 187. The Phoenician Pateiasai, the Greek Kabiri gods and the Olympian god Hephaestus physically resemble pygmies. They were closely associated with the arts of civilization. The Kabiri were also associated with drinking wine and orgiastic rites, thus connecting them with Dionysius. He was sometimes shown like the Kabiri, see figure 38. Concerning this Herodotus said, Melampus the son of Amython knew all about this ceremony, for it was he who introduced the name of Dionysus into Greece, together with the sacrifice in his honor and the phallic procession. Probably Melampus got his knowledge of the worship of Dionysus through Ctmus of Tyre and the people who came with him from Phoenicia to the country now called Bactria. Salincert and Marincola 2003, p. 116. We can thus conclude that the Bactrian representations are made with the pygmy appearance in mind because it was a center of Kabiric worship in Greece. We can also conclude that both Pelasgians and Phoenicians had a class of gods who were intended to be pygmies because the Afro-Canaanites had influenced the peoples of Samothrace and Lemnos. The very name Kabiri appears to have the Phoenician word kabir, great, as its origin. Figure 41, an archaic period vase reproduction, Bizerus hydra, with painting of Heracles in reddish-brown and African curls, fighting white and coal-black Egyptian priests. Figure 42, compare complexion of Heracles in the reproduction to the original. The original is much darker. The above two figures are a reproduction and the original of the famous Bizerus hydra. A hydria is a type of ancient Greek vase. On this one a scene was painted showing coal-black and white-complexioned Egyptian priests being killed by the mighty Greek hero Heracles. In this particular myth, Heracles had been arrested on the orders of Pharaoh Bizerus to be sacrificed to Zeus. He turns the tables on his captors and kills all of them. In the original, Heracles can only be described as a darker variety of African brown. His African appearance is inescapable. Conclusion: during the 2 ND and 1 St millennium BC, black people were not only present but were the foundation of the urban development in the ancient Greek Aegean. They were the formative influences in the Mycenaean and Minoan world and in the later worlds of Northwest Asia Minor, Cyprus, Bactria and Attica. Their existence explains why native Greeks like Sappho and Zeno were not of African birth, as many Western commentators are quick to point out in an attempt to prove them white, but were nonetheless described as dark and likened to Africans. Their existence also explains the origins of black figure style in the art found on vases and amphorae. As Hermstein would say, the hypothesis of the black origins of Greek civilization has numerous explanatory achievements. There were 7 separate black origins and influences for the civilization of ancient Greece. 1. The Libya-Egyptian arrival in Messera, Crete. 2. The Old Kingdom Egyptian influence on Crete. 3. The Old Phoenician or Afro-Canaanite influence on Crete. 4. The New Kingdom Egyptian influence on the Peloponnesus. 5. The Phoenician influence on Bactria contemporary with the New Kingdom. 6. The Phoenician influence on the Aegean front. 9. th century BC. 7. The late Egyptian conquest of parts of the Aegean in the 6th th century BC. The artistic representations from Greece show these black ancestors of the ancient Greeks in an uncompromising way. Many of these have never been seen by the black community. Let us hope this will change with the publication of this book. See our website, http://www.poem-granite.org/. Like our Facebook page, https://www.facebook.com/pomegranate publishing. Other titles from the Pomegranate Library include http://www.amazon.com/black-suma-african-civilization-ebook/dp/b09mrlvly/. http://black-suma-african-origins-civilization/black-suma-african-origins-civilization/dp/14800652855/. For those who want to avoid an African origin of civilization, Sumer, in Iraq, has been assumed to be a safe alternative. We shall see that this is a monumental misconception. Great by http://www.amazon.com/racial-unity-ancient-egyptians-ebook/dp/b009mrlvx2b6/. This face proves, beyond reasonable doubt, that the ancient Egyptians were black. Great by http://black-origins-ancient-roman-emperors-ebook/dp/b00G2 or 3-6/. http://black-ancient-roman-emperors/dp/14936779969/. We founded Europe's second civilization. Great by http://the-black-madonna-christ-ebook/b00D1yep62/. Why was it so important to change the color from black to white? Great by http://the-black-goddess-bible-ebook/dp/b00D9 gopk. Learn about the Afro-Canaanites and the Euro-Canaanite. Great by http://unmistakably-black-sculpture-civilization-ebook/dp/b009-1w0e/. Sculptures and paintings from the world's oldest civilization are unmistakably black. Great by http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-civilization-ebook/dp/b00C9rh8p2/. The Anunnaki were the same color as the ancient Nubians. They kept that one quiet. Great by http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-civilization-ebook/dp/b00B6y7y/. The first European civilization was unmistakably black. Tell a racist. Great by http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-paintings-ebook/dp/b00CA6BRHW/. We are the indigenous people of everywhere. Great by http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-mosaics-ebook/b006f1y7a/. The Moorish image on the cover below is of a Roman god. He was more than a man. Great by http://unmistakably-black-sculpture-civilization-ebook/b00c82vu7a/. White Persians used to curl their hair in imitation of black Persians. How times have changed. Great by http://the-ancient-black-hebrews-ebook/b00 If you were told the ancient Hebrews looked like Charlton Heston, you were lied to. Great by http://www.amazon.com/the-ancient-black-arabs-ebook/b00bt1eroi/. The ancient Arabs did not resemble Saddam Hussein. Discover what the ancient sources say. Great by http://www.amazon.com/the-blackheads-africans-mesopotamia-ebook/b00bpsg/. Mesopotamia is the only alternative to an African origin of civilization. Oh wait, that's African too. Great by http://www.amazon.com/afro-hair-ancient-egyptians-ebook/b00bnuu51a/. The contentious matter of Egyptian hair has now been laid to rest. Great by http://eden-biblical-garden-discovered-ebook/b0063i5wem/. http://www.amazon.com/eden-biblical-garden-discovered-africa/b-1491285448. 6. For those who want to avoid an African origin of humanity, the Bible is assumed to be a safe refuge. False assumption. East Africa is the Garden of Eden and the land of Punt. Every temple of the ancient Egyptian, Greek and Roman world was intended to be a microcosm of Ethiopia. Learn about the sacred longitude and the source of biblical miracles. Great by http://origins-egyptian-predenastic-civilization-ebook/b00bev63s/. Osiris, Horus, Amun, Hathor and the major Egyptian deities were all from the far south. Great by http://www.amazon.com/african-origin-egyptians-ebook/b00 The ancient Egyptians knew that the world was round. Great by http://www.amazon.com/african-rulers-medieval-yemen-ebook/b0079sgr4/. http://www.amazon.com/african-rulers-medieval-volume/dp/14782381000/. What is more impressive, to become a king having come from a long line of kings, or to become a king having come from a long line of the enslaved? Great by http://www.amazon.com/black-suma-physical-evidence-ebook/b005/b0b-k9x7sc/. http://www.amazon.com/black-suma-physical-evidence-part/d-p//14826394440/. Ancient Egypt was black. Now ancient Sumer is shown to have been too, using CSI level of proof. The racist is fast. Running out of civilizations. Great by http://www.amazon.com/black-suma-physical-evidence-ebook/d-p//b006-1sky9g/. http://www.amazon.com/black-suma-physical-evidence-part/d-p//14826478344/http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture. Repainting Civilizations/dp/14903197443/. http://www.amazon.com/http://www.amazon.com/black-madonna-christ-goddess-bible/dp/14912128888/. http://www.amazon.com/african-nubian-origins-ancient-egyptians/dp/14912863264/r